Are you a writer? Have you ever written a book? If you were to ask most people, would you like to write a book? So many would say yes, yes. So few, in proportion to those who say yes, ever get around to it. But if you do, you'll probably realise it's a far bigger job than you thought it might have been. I've been writing not just books, but short stories, essays, poetry, letters, articles, for about 50 years, a bit over 50 years. And I find that the hardest books to write are not books on facts, not books on areas where you have competence, but novels, books of fiction. Not even short stories, because short stories, the idea, there's one idea in there, one central idea that you can get out. But writing a work of fiction, putting it all together, that is a real challenge. And yet, fiction is the hardest to get published. Of course, now there's self-publication, and many are doing that. This means, of course, to some degree, that the standard of writing received by the public generally has dropped. Because in the old days, the publication houses, had so much to pick from. And of course generally, they picked the cream. Maybe 2 or 3% of the works of fiction they received were published, maybe even less. I'm not saying this to put you off from writing, because, as I've said before, people now self-publish. I'm one of those persons who never had a book published by a publisher. But I have been writing, and people have been reading my stuff for a long while now. Not a lot of people, but certainly some. What I'm trying to say here to you is this. If you want to be a writer, you have to persist. You have to persist. And the best advice I ever got, which got me really writing for the rest of my life, was many years ago, would have been back in 1969, 68, 69. I was doing a writing course in a trade union organisation known as the WEA. I think it's the Workers' Education Association, or something of that nature. I was coming home, and I was sitting at the railway station with another person who was in the same course. And we were talking about writing. And he said this to me, Tom. He said, if you're serious about becoming a writer, you've got to write every day. Every day. Not when you feel like it. Sit down and write something every day. At least until the habit is so established in you that you feel uneasy if you haven't written something. And this I did. And it resulted in my first novel, which took a lot of writing and rewriting. And over the years, it was rewritten, until it became my first book, which was called Search Time Expired, a book set against aviation in the 1960s in Papua New Guinea. Perhaps the hardest book to write for me was a book based on my own life experiences as a sailor in the Australian Navy. I call that book Sailor Boy Blue. Very difficult to write because it was so close to my own life. Now, every book I've written, and there's only been 3 as far as the fiction side. I've written about 15 books, but of fiction, only 3. And here's one of them. The Sealers. I wrote this 2 or 3 years after I came back from serving for 12 months with the Australian National Antarctic Research Expeditions, ANARE, on Macquarie Island. And of course, you can't live in a place like Macquarie Island with its history and with its wildlife and its isolation and ruggedness without being affected if you're a writer. And so I eventually wrote this book, The Sealers. So what am I saying here? I guess what I'm saying is this. If you want to write, you need to get into the habit of writing every day. Remember, the hardest books to write are those novels based on backgrounds out of your own life, because you find yourself identifying so readily with the characters in your book. In a way, you are writing something out of your own system, getting rid of that sensitivity about something which you've held within for so long. Writing non-fiction, I find is pretty easy. Just think about it for a while, create a mind map, and then start typing. That's the way you go. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this little talk, virtually to myself, and I hope that you, if you did listen to this, and you are a writer, persist, get into the habits, and after you've written, they say, after you've written 500,000 words, you'll have a style, your style. Keep writing, you'll get there, wherever there is.